What's up guys, today we have a super exciting package from Zhiyun and this is the latest Crane 2S. Super excited about this gimbal and that's because I have been using the original Crane 2 for the longest time. I had it pretty much since it came out. I use it on all of my music videos. It's very scratched up, it's been for a lot, including rain. So it's been a great gimbal, but I'm super excited to show you what the new Crane 2S can do and all of its features because it has a lot of improvements over the original. So first, let's take a look at what the Crane 2S can do. So the Crane 2S comes in this carrying case. It's nice and handy to have, but personally I do just carry the gimbal by itself. And inside we have the gimbal as well as a lot of accessories. So let's run through them very quickly. We have the battery charger for 3 of the batteries. Next we have the batteries. They'll last you around 12 hours in normal use. So that's pretty much a full day of shooting. If you want to be safe, you can get an extra pair and you'll be good. Next we have the release system for the quick release plate. I'll show you how that works really soon. Next we have the lens support mount, which mounts on your quick release plate. Right in the front, you can screw that in. So this is very good for very heavy lenses. It gives extra support in the front. And if your lens is very thick, like thicker than the camera body itself, Zhiyun also include this raising plate for the camera. So you can attach this here, attach the camera to this raising plate, and it gives the camera a little bit of extra height. So it might be handy, depends on what camera you are using. Next up, we have the cables. And as you might know, if you ever bought any Zhiyun product, they always include heaps and heaps of cables, so you're always gonna find some kind of cable that works for your camera. First, we have a little bag with screws for the quick release plates, and in here we have just a bunch of cables. So let's go through them. We have a normal USB to USB-C, so that will pretty much power the battery charger. Next, we have a USB-C to micro USB. We have another USB-C to micro USB, except this micro USB is a bit longer. And here we have USB-C to USB-C. So this cable I'll actually be using for my camera. So I'm using the Lumix S5. So I can hook up the USB-C port to my camera, the other USB-C to the camera control port on the Crane 2S, and that way I can have control over some of my settings as well as the record button. And last but not least, we have a USB-C to the old type of USB. But that's a lot of cables that might come in handy. So next, we've got the Crane 2S. Once we got the batteries inside, we can take out the little tripod and take out this quick release plate mount and place it in here, lock it in, and I'll show you what that does for your gimbal. So here we have the Crane 2S, but we also have a few accessories. So we have the follow focus for the Crane 2S. So let's do a quick run through of what comes in a box. We get instruction manual. Inside of this little box, we have a USB-C to USB-C cable that just powers the motors. And inside we also get 2 gear rings, so we can put one on each lens. If you want to get extra ones, they're pretty cheap. So here we have the focus motor. It has a little switch between focus and zoom. So let's say you have 2 of these. One can be set to focus, one can be set to zoom. And next, underneath that, we have the calibration button. This one is used when you set everything up, press and hold, and it will calibrate to your manual lens with the hard stops. And here we have a few accessories that will help us mount the motor onto the camera setup. And we also have another accessory, which is a dual camera setup mount, which allows us to mount 2 cameras, one on the bottom, one on top, or anything else that you might want to mount on this gimbal. So it's very similar to what I've done with my Crane 3S, where I mounted 2 cameras on my Crane 3S, and that was a very interesting experience. So the Crane 2S gimbal is really cool because, as you can see, it feels very sturdy and very solid. It doesn't flop around like the Crane 2. This one just moves around everywhere, especially if you have a heavy camera. The camera keeps hitting the metal pieces, and it's just not a great system. But here we have a very good upgrade. Everything feels very sturdy, and you can just unlock these. Boom. Now we have control over individual axes. We can unlock this, lock it in this position, unlock this, lock it in this position, and now it's actually a lot easier to balance the cameras. Next up, we have these little rosette mounts on both sides. So they're really cool because we can mount some accessories to the gimbal. And we have this little accessory from Digital Photo. It has the same mount on here, so that will just fit in. Just screw this in. And because it has the mount, it will never spin around. And that's it. Now we have a monitor attached to the Crane 2S with this little nice attachment, and we can swivel it around with one hand, tighten it in this angle, or if we want to go lower, untighten, go down, tighten again. We can get some low shots. Next we have the focus wheel. It is very smooth, but it also has a lot of resistance, which is good because the previous focus wheel was very soft, like it didn't have much resistance. It was very tricky to focus at times, especially with shallow depth of field. This one is much more precise follow focus. Down here we have a little display, joystick, all the buttons to control the settings on the gimbal. The cool thing about the gimbal and the little accessory here that I showed you before is that you can actually slide this out. So usually what happens is you have the quick release plate, and if you want to take out the camera to do some tripod shots or some handheld shots, you slide out this quick release plate, and once you put it back in, the whole balance of the gimbal is lost. It's gone. So every time you take off this plate, you have to rebalance the gimbal. So the cool thing about the Crane 2S design is that you can actually slide this entire plate off, and it does have some 1/4-20 threads down the bottom, so you can mount another plate here and chuck this whole thing onto your tripod. And that way, if you put this back over here, lock it in, and you're good to go without having to balance. So it's great that the Crane 2S has this option. I actually already invested in a different plate system, so I chuck on these photography plates on top of my gimbals, on top of my tripods, monopods, everything else. And this way, with these little plates I have, allows me to put the camera on very quickly, balance it, everything's balanced, and I can take it off, do my handheld stuff, put it on a tripod, and then once I put it back on, everything's still balanced. You just need to flip this lock switch. And another positive about these is that the plates on the bottom are much smaller than the whole plate here. With my little photography quick release plates, I can actually take the camera off without taking the entire follow focus wheel, and then I can put it back on and it's ready to focus again. Otherwise, if you have the camera mounted together with the plate, the follow focus thing comes together with you, so you need to unscrew this whole thing. So this is my solution for working with gimbals and any other type of gear. I like these little plates, and that's why I mount them on every piece of gear that I have. And one thing about this gimbal you might be thinking is that the motor is very high and it's obstructing the view of the monitor. Actually, you can take out this part over here and move the motor down. So if you want to have a good view of your screen, then you can just do that. But with most of the cameras these days, they do have flip out screen, so that's fine. And also, personally, I'm gonna be using the monitor, external monitor over here, mounted down there, so I don't really need a screen on the camera to be working anyway. So I'm fine with this motor being up here. And I also notice when I'm down low doing this kind of movement, the motor works a lot better when it's mounted in a higher position rather than in the lower. But if you do want to have a good view of your monitor, you can definitely unscrew this part, move it down lower. It's really good to see that Zhiyun has included this feature on the new Crane 2S. So next up, I want to show you how to balance your gimbal. If you've done that already, if you know how to do it, you can skip to this time frame. But if you haven't, definitely check this out. So now we have attached the follow focus motor with the gears onto the lens. So we just slide it on. First of all, we want to lock all the axes. So we lock this one, we lock this one, and we just unlock the front and back position. And we want to slide the plate forward and back until it seems like it's staying straight. We lock it in, and now we point the camera up. If the camera is moving forward, then we want to move this entire thing back. So there's a little lock up here. We unlock it, move it down, and now we can move the entire setup forward and back. So we want to make the camera look straight up without moving to any side. So that's about it. Now we lock this in, point it straight again. If it stays straight, that means it's good. If we point it in any direction, it should stay locked in. So that means it's now balanced. Next up, we want to unlock the back motor, and it's a little bit left heavy, so we want to move this to the right. And a good trick with this is to lift up the camera a bit and then move this arm. Otherwise, it's very hard to move it without lifting the camera up. Especially with bigger rigs, they do get quite heavy and hard to move. So it's best to put your hand underneath the camera. Once it's locked, it should stay in the place. And last, we have the bottom motor. Unlock this, and basically what we want to achieve with this is when we move the camera to a side, we want it to stay perfectly straight like this. Don't move to any other direction. So we just unlock this, see how it goes. If it goes forward, we just move it backwards a bit. See how it is now. A little bit too much. Want to move it forward. So now if we bring the gimbal to the side, it stays nice and straight. So that's great. So now the gimbal is ready to go, ready and balanced. It's on, the follow focus is working. It's nice to have some resistance in this follow focus wheel. It makes it nice and smooth and very precise to adjust the focus. And also if you want, you can plug in your camera to the camera control USB-C port, which is down here. So it's camera control. So we want to plug this in on the back here. Boom. And by the way, also the follow focus is plugged in to the front. There's two USB-C ports, so one's for follow focus, one's for the zoom. So once we got the gimbal plugged into the camera, we can adjust some of the settings. So shutter speed we can adjust. As you can see, it's kind of adjusting there. We can change to ISO. ISO we can also adjust all the way from the highest to the lowest. And also exposure compensation. So if you're in any other mode than manual, you can adjust the exposure compensation on here. The only setting that didn't work for me is the aperture. When the aperture is, let's say at f13, it does show up here and I can move the aperture down, but not all the way. It goes from 11 to f10, from f11 to f10. If I move it down a bit on the camera, f7.1, I can actually move it all the way down to f3.5, but I can't go back up. So not sure if that's like a firmware bug or anything like that. But we can also control the start and stop recording. So I can just hit the record button on the gimbal here. And as you can see, it already started recording on the Lumix S5, and I can also stop the recording. So that's really handy if you're doing some run and gun stuff and you want to change your ISO because you went from outside to inside and that kind of thing, and then you want to start and stop recording. Change the shutter speed, change the ISO, really handy stuff. A cool thing that Zhiyun has done with this gimbal is actually allow us to film vertical video. So for the people that do Instagram and TikTok content, we can now slide it out and slide it in on the side, lock it in. And one thing you just gotta do now is rebalance the gimbal for vertical. But this is really cool because you can actually shoot vertical video on a gimbal without using a camera cage or without using an L bracket. It just comes straight with the gimbal. A lot of people might shoot vertical video horizontally and then just crop in, but that limits a lot of your resolution. So big plus to Zhiyun for making this gimbal very versatile for all kind of content creators. And the second accessory I had, which is the dual camera mount, actually just slides on the second quick release. And you just slide it on, locks in place, and now we've got a dual camera setup. So this is really cool, but keep in mind that up top here, I do have my extra plate down the bottom, so that raises my camera quite a lot, which means I cannot slide this camera back enough. So the balancing is a little bit harder, a little bit tricky. You gotta lower the entire system a little bit lower, and because I also have this plate up here, it's probably a little bit too high and too top heavy. So I think the best use for this is, for example, mounting a smaller camera on top, like a behind the scenes camera, or actually a 360-degree camera. That way you can have your main camera filming the main shots, you can focus on that, And right above here, you have mounted a 360 camera. And this also has a little cold shoe mount, so you can mount a microphone or anything like that. And of course, the Crane 2S has all the modes that we're used to on gimbals these days. So we have pan follow, which only follows the panning. We have lock mode, which actually locks the camera in one position. Next up, we have point of view. So this also affects the roll, panning, tilting, all the movements are engaged. Next, we have vertigo. So this is the cool mode. And also the cool thing is we can adjust a lot of these settings, so how the gimbal reacts to a certain movement. So we can adjust the vertigo kind of movement speed from within the gimbal itself. We don't actually have to go into the app. And also with the joystick over here, we can adjust the joystick speed and that type of stuff straight from the menu over here. And on the front, we also have a trigger button. When we hold it, it goes into follow mode. So it will follow left and right, up and down, but it will not roll. So that's the difference between follow and point of view. And if you're feeling like you want to take a selfie or film yourself in a selfie mode, we press 3 times on the trigger button and the camera will spin around to get a selfie shot. And that's also in, looks like a pan follow mode. And another cool thing, within the menu we have automatic calibration. So depending on how heavy our system is, we can just hit auto calibrate. The gimbal will kind of go through different stages of motor strength and calibrate the motors, especially for our camera weight. So that's really cool that we don't have to do that manually. There's an automatic setting for that. And the cool thing is we have some advanced settings in here. So speed, smooth, and deadband, which all control how the gimbal reacts to the movement. And those settings also control the joystick, so how fast it will pan and tilt the camera. The Crane 2S is pretty much better in every way over the original Crane 2, but we also have the Crane 3S. So the Crane 3S has a lot of similar features to the Crane 2, but it can handle even bigger camera setups, especially if you do end up getting the power bank from Zhiyun. This one plugs in through a D-tap port straight to the Crane 3S. So once you connect this power bank straight to the Crane 3S, it will give it even more power to handle bigger setups. So with the Crane 3S, it is a lot easier to get low type of shots. So using this handle, you can get nice, low, smooth shots. But if you're getting more normal shots, it is a little bit more heavy on your left arm than the right arm, unless you hold it like this. So it's a little bit more tricky. So with the Crane 3S, I would definitely recommend having an easy rig setup with something like a ring. So you can place the Crane 3S on the ring, mount the ring onto the easy rig, and then all the weight of the gimbal and your camera and all your setup is on your hips rather than in your arms. But if you're more of a run and gun filmmaker, I can definitely recommend you to get the Crane 2S because it is lighter, easier to hold, and you can still put bigger cameras such as the S1H or a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. And so far I've been able to get really nice and smooth shots with the Crane 2S, and that's mostly due to the new, more powerful motors. And if you like the handle of the Crane 3S, Zhiyun is actually coming out with a handle that you can mount here and get nice, smooth, low-angle shots, just like on the Crane 3S, and you can always take it off and have more of a simple gimbal. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you got any questions about the Crane 2S, leave them down below in the comments or message me on Instagram at KwasnikPictures and smash that subscribe button. I'll see you guys next time. Peace!